Hey, thanks so much for joining me on Between the Two of Us, a mental health podcast. I'm your host, Jen Alley, a licensed professional counselor, wife, and mom. In this podcast, we will talk about modern day life as it relates to your mental health. Drawing on my professional experiences of being a therapist the last 14 years, my background in education, and my personal experiences, I want to help you feel less alone in your struggles while teaching you what I wish everyone knew about brain science and mental health. While this podcast isn't therapy, I will offer practical tools and strategies grounded in neuroscience to improve your relationships, life, and mental wellness. Thanks so much for listening. Grab your cup of coffee or your walking shoes and let's get started. Welcome back to Between the Two of Us. This is your host, Jen Alley, and I am wanting to talk to you today about what do we do when we are going through hard times. And as I mentioned, I think it was last time on the podcast, we have some stuff going on with one of our kids. And for those of you who are parents, or even if you're not, we love people, and it's hard when somebody's going through something, or if there's some uncertainty, and it can feel stressful. And I think especially as a parent, it can make you feel sort of powerless and not really sure how to, go about everything in the right way and try to get the most support and help for them. So while our child is going to be okay, it's tough to see them going through something that feels hard and to not know how it's going to all turn out. But I also wanted to talk to you today a little bit about this idea of all of us are going to go through hard times or hard things. There's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be difficulty in all of our lives at different times. And so what do we do when that happens? Because I think for many people, including myself, right, there can be a tendency to withdraw or to kind of go silent. There can be a tendency to numb out. That could be through a lot of things, anything from scrolling to drinking or drugs, lots of television, whatever your kind of flavor of numbing out looks like. You also might ruminate or obsessively think about the thing. I think I personally fall into the category of hyper researching, right? Spending lots and lots of time trying to understand, which I think, in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but it can really maybe overtake, maybe to a fault, right? Researching to the point where okay, I just need to wait. I need to kind of see how this plays out after we see the doctors and things like that. So I also, when I'm in hard times, right, have a tendency to do the things that probably feel more protective, right? Things that make my system feel I think even anxiety, right? It gives our brain a sense of control or feeling like we're doing something when we're worrying or when we're ruminating or when we're researching. And it's not to say don't worry, but it is to say there's a point at which it's not really helping us, right? So one of the things in therapy, one of our jobs is to help people to be with the reality of whatever they're going through. And sometimes reality is really hard at different times for people. Maybe they're going through grief, or maybe through job loss and feeling really scared about finances, going through a divorce, right? There's a lot of our reality that can feel really tough. But I think, when we have kind of the ostrich effect, we want to stick our head in the sand and ignore it. That's just, staying in denial actually prevents us from adapting or growing or taking action or seeking solutions or healing. And that's not to say that being in denial doesn't serve a purpose or that there's not a time for that. Our bodies, again, do a lot of this automatically, especially if we're in a time of, trauma or grief. But I think that there are other times where pretending like something isn't happening might feel better because it feels less scary, but then it doesn't allow us to move through the experience and to really experience the reality of what it is. And then we can get stuck. And so that goes along with this next concept, which is this idea of really identifying and being with our feelings or our emotions. And I think a lot of people feel like, well, feelings are stupid, or they're not real, they're not grounded in reality. but they are information about how we're doing in the world or how we're doing with an experience. And what happens is if we avoid our feelings, they're still there, but they come out sideways, right? They become stuck. Maybe we get really irritable with the people around us or angry. Maybe we have like aggression when we're driving. Maybe we end up having these feelings, but then we like drink to try to numb the feelings. So our emotions, while they might not be like capital T truth about the reality, they are important information about how we're doing. And when we can process them and be with them and learn to reflect on them, that will help us to move through them instead of them becoming stuck. So it's okay to not be okay sometimes, right? Like it's okay to feel sad or feel down or depressed, like about this current situation we have. I feel some stress. I feel some worry and anxiety, a lot of uncertainty about it, a lot of sadness about it. Anytime something's going on with one of our kids, I think it causes a little more conflict with my husband and I. So that feels stressful too. So, these things happen, right? It's okay to not be okay sometimes, but it's kind of like, well, what are we going to do with those emotions? And so we might need to journal or we might need to talk with someone. We also might need to seek support. So the next thing that's helpful is to get outside of our house or our environment or our routine. I've been a little bit under the weather, and so I've been at home a lot. And then, this whole thing has been going on with one of our kids. And so I've been thinking about it a lot and just kind of feeling like, ugh. And so I was feeling better. So I put on my walking shoes, and we are, fortunate, privileged to have some walking trails in our neighborhood. And there's points when you're on the walking trail that you can't even see that you're in a neighborhood, right? You're just in this trail. And automatically, when we start moving and walking, there's that bilateral stimulation that happens. Being out in nature, right? I automatically started to feel less stuck and to feel better, and felt really good to move my body. And I walked, about 1.5 miles up to this top of this hill where there's this bench. And what's interesting is that like once I got to the top of the hill, I could see like I had so much more perspective, and there's all these houses and you could, kind of see everything. Whereas when you're on the trail, you couldn't even really see what was going on. But up there, I just kind of like was able to look out at the horizon and sort of see the sort of bigger picture. And so I think when we get out of our house or our environment or our routine, it gives us this perspective. It helps us to have a little bit more perspective, right? That like the world, our lives are more than just this little tiny thing that's happening. And sometimes it's a big thing. I mean, sometimes it's a really scary big thing or hard thing that's happening, but that there's like more than just that one thing, if that makes sense. And so again, that's not to minimize our experience or minimize what's going on, but it is to give us this wider perspective. Another thing, that I love to do sometimes is just to go lay out on the ground or in a chair and look up at the stars. And I think that there's something about that just kind of, for me, gives me a lot of perspective and just kind of helps me to feel more expansive instead of so constricted. So maybe think about for you, like what helps you to have more perspective or gives you that kind of wider view. It reminds me of when you're trying to read a paper, if it's up against your nose, like you probably can't read it, right? The words are too blurred when they're that close. But like when you back it up, you can read it, you can see it more clearly. So what is it in your life that gives you a little bit of perspective? So if you are a person who ruminates, that just means like a lot of worrying, kind of replaying it over and over in your mind, you might want to set a time limit. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to try to problem solve. I'm going to let myself really think through it. And then I'm going to move into distracting. I'm going to get outside. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to, pull weeds in the garden. I'm going to fold laundry, whatever the thing is. If you are an avoider, naturally a head in the sand person, you might need to set time, like again, 15 minutes to really be with your feelings, to reflect or to journal. If you have a spiritual practice or you're a person of faith, I think this is an opportunity for us to spend time in prayer and meditation. And, of course, if you're going through something hard, maybe there's anger there, and that's okay, right? It's just allowing ourselves to experience whatever we're experiencing. But for many people, having sort of prayerfulness, meditation, some sort of spiritual practice can be helpful for that perspective and also, just as a source of comfort. We also need to seek support from others who are compassionate and kind. And so hopefully you have friends in your life. I know for myself, I have this really incredible group of therapists that we've been in consultation together for several years now. And, I just found myself kind of sharing with them what was going on and felt, emotions come up because sometimes when we're sharing that happens, right? It kind of helps us to touch into that. But it was okay. It was a safe place to share. And it wasn't like they said a ton of things, but they were compassionate and warm and caring and loving and expressed that. And then I didn't feel so alone in it, right? So having that support can be really helpful. And if you don't find that you have that in your world, it might be really important to seek some sort of professional therapy just to have more of that experience in your world, because helping us to feel less alone is a huge part of, I think, not just feeling so overwhelmed or so stuck or so alone in it. You might also just remind yourself, like, I have been through difficult times before. I've gotten through this. I am resilient. Maybe there were even things that helped you then that could help you now. So you could reflect on, like, when I've been through similar or other difficult experiences in my life, what helped us to get through that? And so, the truth is that our experiences do change us. And, I don't know anyone who wants to go through hard times. Like, no, thank you. I want things to be rosy and peachy too. And I'm not suggesting that, bad things happen so we can grow or so we can learn. No, of course not. But can we grow from experiences? Can we allow these things to impact us in an important way? Of course, right? And so research shows that up to 70% of people experience positive psychological growth from difficult times. So I think that's an important statistic, because it's not to say that you deserve bad things in order to grow or you need them, but there is character building. There is a greater capacity a lot of times for empathy and altruism. I think difficult times can give us a greater appreciation for life or for our loved ones. It can help us prioritize and remember what really matters, what's important. I think it can deepen our sense of connection to ourself and, maybe even our purpose in life. It can give us more of a sense of meaning. It also can help us to feel more tied in with our community. I think of, like, when hard things happen, I'm thinking of different hurricanes or even during COVID, right? And, like, people really reaching out to support and help other people, to show up for them, and how meaningful that is when we see people showing up for us. And so, of course, I don't want bad things to happen in your life, but when hard things are there, it is an opportunity actually for us to learn and to grow. And when we're in it, like, it's hard to see that, right? It's hard to imagine that that's possible. But I do think that there are things that we can ask ourselves that can help with that process. So, of course, as we said before, being with our feelings, but also being willing to ask hard questions, like, what matters to me? What's important to me? What do I value? What do I want my life to be about? If I'm behaving as my sort of highest self in this moment, what would that look like? What am I learning about myself in this process? What am I learning about what matters to me? So again, we may or may not be able to do that when we're in the messy middle, but I think that those are things that can come out of hard times if we're willing to sort of reflect and be with it. So I do think it's important to say that when hard things happen and we feel alone in it, it often feels more traumatic to us. And so part of decreasing the impact, the traumatic impact, not making it go away, but part of decreasing it is to undo that aloneness. And so we want to seek support, again, from a therapist, from a friend. Seeking support is super important. And again, if we do not allow ourselves to experience these emotions, we can get stuck in them. They can come out in harder ways, even health ways, right? Like they can cause us health problems. So we want to seek help when we're in hard times. We want to allow ourselves to experience the full range of emotions and to seek the support that we need to move through the experience so we can have less negative impact on our bodies and on our minds and on our spirits. So when we're in hard times, we can practice journaling. We also could, have some positive affirmations that might be helpful. We want to practice self-care when possible. So things like moving our bodies, getting enough rest, eating well, drinking plenty of water. And again, these things can be hard when we're stressed. Those things can be difficult to do. And finally, most important, we want to seek the support that we need in order to not feel so alone in the experience. So I hope you found something helpful for today. I hope that you are not going through something hard, but I do hope that this serves you when you are going through something hard. And I think it's important to know that we're not alone, that, we all go through difficult times, and that when we go through it with others by our side, it just feels a lot better. It feels, like we're cared for. The burden feels lighter. And so please share this episode if you found it helpful, maybe with somebody who is going through a hard time. And also please leave a review if you have not done that already. That would be super helpful. You can find me at www.jenalley.com. You can also find me over at jen.alley.therapist on Instagram. Thanks so much for listening. I'll look forward to being back here with you again next time.